Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're cutting straight to, well, a pretty fundamental question. It underpins almost everything in our world, doesn't it? From the economy right through to ethics.
It really does.
So here's the hook. What single economic concept explains why civilizations rise and fall, why you, listening right now, choose to save money, or maybe why you don't.
Yeah.
And maybe the most surprising claim from our source material today, why modern art looks the way it does.
It sounds like a stretch, but the argument's there. We're taking a really deep, almost philosophical look today.
Right?
The sources we're drawing on, they're really steeped in the Austrian School of Economics, rigorous stuff, plus some pretty heavy-duty civilizational history.
Okay.
And the core argument is that the money we use, it's way more than just some neutral token for exchange.
It's not just bits of paper or numbers on a screen.
Exactly. The argument is it's a moral tool. It actually dictates how we see the future, our vision for it.
Okay, so that's the mission for this deep dive then. We're unpacking two big ideas that are totally linked: sound money and time preference.
That's the core pair.
We're going to explore how the kind of money a society uses fundamentally shapes, well, the individual's time horizon, their willingness to wait, to delay gratification.
And that willingness, or the lack of it, is presented as the engine behind, well, everything.
Everything, like huge infrastructure projects, big tech breakthroughs.
But also things like family stability, the quality of the culture, the art, the music. It all supposedly links back.
So if you want a shortcut, like a key to understanding why some societies succeed and others seem to decline, our sources argue this link is it.
It's a big claim, but that's what we're diving into. ##22. Defining the economic foundations. #A. What is sound money?
All right, let's kick things off with the money itself. When we talk about sound money, we need to be clear. We're not just talking about whatever cash the government says you have to use.
No, definitely not legal tender laws. This is specifically the Austrian school definition we're using here.
And what does that emphasize?
It emphasizes that sound money is a medium of exchange that arises freely in the market. People choose it.
Based on what? Just preference?
Based on its actual usefulness, its reliability, it has to work.
That distinction feels important. Market participants choose it because it's good, not because some authority forces them.
That's the idea. And for money to be chosen like that, to be truly sound, it has to do its job effectively across time and space.
Okay.
Our sources point to basically 4 essential characteristics that let it do that job.
Okay, lay them out for us. What's the first one?
The first, and you could argue it's the most critical, is that it has to maintain its value effectively over time.
So it needs to be a good store of wealth.
Exactly. If it predictably loses value, well, it fails right there. People won't hold it long term.
Makes sense. What's number 2?
Second, it needs to transport value across distances, not just geographically, like sending money overseas,
Right.
but also across time. It needs to be useful, potentially, for your kids or grandkids, holding value across generations.
Okay, store of value, transportability across space and time. Got it. What else? You mentioned 4.
Third, pretty straightforward. It needs to be easily divisible and collectible. You need to be able to use it for big things, like buying property.
And small things, like a coffee.
Precisely. It needs to work at all scales. But the fourth one, this is where it gets really crucial, especially for the societal aspect.
Ah, the political angle you mentioned.
Exactly. Its supply cannot be easily manipulated by some authority, especially one that can force people to use it anyway.
Okay, hold on. Why is that considered a characteristic of the money itself? Couldn't stable money sometimes be, managed centrally?
Well, the argument and the historical evidence presented in the sources points the other way.
How so?
The moment a government or any coercive power gets the ability to create money out of thin air at will,
Yeah.
that money stops being sound, almost by definition, according to this view, regardless of what it's made of.
So the non-manipulation aspect is inherent to its soundness.
Yes, because its absence fundamentally undermines the social and economic functions. As soon as rulers can just inflate the supply.
They're essentially stealing.
That's the argument. They're stealing purchasing power from savers, from people who produced things yesterday, to fund things today without direct consent. Sound money, by its nature, has to be resistant to those political whims. Independent.
Okay, so let's say a society manages to find or stick with money that meets those 4 criteria: value stability, transportability, divisibility, and non-manipulation. What are the big payoffs?
The sources highlight 3 huge advantages. The first one And this is really the foundation for our whole discussion today. It's psychological.
How so?
Because sound money holds its value over long stretches. It gives people a powerful incentive to think about the future, to plan for it, invest in it.
It lowers their, what was the term?
Their time preference. It systematically encourages people to value the future more highly than they otherwise would.
Okay, that's big. What's the second benefit, the more practical economic one?
Right. Stability of measurement. Sound money acts like a stable ruler for value.
A reliable yardstick.
Exactly.
Hmm.
This lets businesses make long-term plans, especially for big projects that take years or decades. You need stable calculations for that.
Which helps markets grow.
Absolutely. It facilitates large free markets. And the argument goes, where free trade thrives based on reliable calculation, so do peace and prosperity.
Yeah.
Unsound money, where prices are constantly shifting unpredictably.
Makes planning a nightmare.
Totally. It makes economic calculation unreliable. And our sources argue this is the root cause, often missed, of booms, busts, recessions, crises. The unstable unit of account messes everything up.
Okay, incentive to save, stable calculation.
Right.
What's the third big benefit? It links back to that political check, right?
It does. It's seen as a prerequisite for individual liberty against potential oppression.
Explain that.
If a government can just create money whenever it wants, it gains enormous, almost unchecked power over its citizens. It can fund wars, massive bureaucracies, whatever it wants, without having to go to the people directly and ask for taxes, which is politically difficult.
So sound money limits that power.
It acts as a vital check. It forces rulers to live within their means, more or less. The sources suggest it attracts more ethically grounded leaders who understand constraints, rather than just opportunists drawn by the lure of unlimited spending power. Hashtag B. Understanding time preference.
TP. All right, let's really unpack this core idea, time preference. You said sound money lowers it. What exactly is it? We all make decisions based on it, apparently, but the formal definition can sound a bit academic.
It can, but it's actually very simple at its core. Time preference, or TP, is just the ratio by which any individual values something now compared to getting the exact same thing later.
So how much more I want something today versus, say, next year?
Precisely. It's
Okay.
fundamental to any decision involving a trade-off between the present and the future. Any choice that involves waiting or not waiting.
And you mentioned earlier, the sources say TP is always positive for humans. We always prefer now to later, at least a little bit. Why is that baked in?
Two main reasons, really. Biology and uncertainty. First, we're mortal. Survival requires consumption now.
You have to eat today to be around tomorrow.
Exactly. So present needs are inherently more urgent. Second, the future is uncertain. You might not be around to collect that future reward, or circumstances could change dramatically. A bird in hand, right?
So immediate consumption is always favored, biologically speaking.
Yes, over the exact same consumption later. That's the baseline.
Okay, so if I value, say, $100 today more than $100 a year from now, how do we actually measure how much more I value it? Where does the ratio come in?
Ah, right. So rational individuals also understand something else. Resources available now can be used. They can be invested, put to work to produce more goods or value in the meantime.
Okay.
Therefore, to get you to willingly delay consumption, to give up having that $100 now, you need to be offered more than $100 in the future.
An incentive to wait, a return.
Exactly. The percentage increase required to make you postpone consumption for a specific period, like a year, defines your time preference rate.
So if I'm only willing to save my $100 if I get $110 back next year, my TP rate is 10%.
That's the idea. If you demanded $200 back to wait a year, your TP would be much higher, 100%. You discount the future much more heavily.
And while everyone's TP is positive, the actual rate varies wildly.
Dramatically, from person to person, culture to culture, and crucially for our discussion, depending on the perceived stability and soundness of the money they use.
Okay, so we all have this time preference. If we look across the animal kingdom versus humans, the difference seems pretty stark, right? It highlights why TP matters.
Absolutely. Animals generally show an incredibly high time preference. They operate almost entirely on immediate, instinctive urges.
Hunger, fear, aggression.
Right. Their planning horizon is typically very short the next meal, maybe the changing season. They can't really conceive of, let alone plan for, needs 10 years down the line.
And humans. Our ability to curb those instincts is key.
That's the argument. Low time preference is what allows us to override those immediate impulses, to act rationally instead of purely instinctively. And this enables the crucial step.
The move from just consuming to building.
Exactly. Instead of using all our time and resources producing stuff for immediate consumption, we can choose to spend some of that valuable time creating better, longer-lasting things that aren't immediately consumable.
Capital goods.
Capital goods, yes. Tools, infrastructure, knowledge, things that dramatically increase our productivity later. We undertake longer processes to satisfy needs further out in time.
This idea of delaying immediate satisfaction to build tools, there's a formal economic concept for this, right? You mentioned it briefly.
Yes, this is what Hans Hermann Hoppe calls the process of detour. Investment, fundamentally, is a detour.
A detour from what?
From the most direct, immediate way of satisfying a need towards a more roundabout but ultimately more productive method. It requires delaying that instant gratification to spend resources making capital goods first.
The classic example always seems to be the fisherman. Can you walk us through that? How does it show the detour?
Sure. Imagine our early human ancestor standing by a river. They're hungry. The high TP option is immediate. Jump in, try to catch fish with bare hands.
High effort, low reward, probably.
Likely. And they eat whatever they catch right away. Now, the low TP alternative, that's the detour.
Okay.
Instead of fishing today, maybe they spend 2 whole days not fishing, gathering the right wood, finding sharp stones, painstakingly crafting a spear, or maybe a fishing rod.
And crucially, that spear isn't edible. It doesn't satisfy today's hunger.
Not at all. It's purely an investment, and it's risky.
Right. They could starve while making it, or the spear might break, or just not work well.
Exactly. There's a real cost and risk to the detour. But if the investment pays off,
The reward is much greater.
potentially vastly greater. Maybe that spear allows them to catch 10 times the fish with the same effort for years to come. That's the essence of capital accumulation taking the detour.
So the underlying principle here is,
The fundamental law, according to the sources, is clear. The lower an individual's time preference, the more likely they are to take these detours to engage in investment and capital accumulation. They extend the time horizon of their production.
and as that capital builds up, spears become rods, rods become nets, nets become boats.
Labor productivity just skyrockets. This ability to postpone gratification and build capital is basically the starting gun for all economic development and civilization itself.
Okay, that process of detour makes sense conceptually. To really drive home how powerful this time preference difference is, let's revisit that riverbank.
Right.
Let's look at two individuals starting identically, but with very different TPs, Harry and Linda.
Right. This analogy makes it very concrete. So Harry, let's say he has a high time preference. He wants fish now.
Bare hands it is.
He spends his whole day, maybe 8 hours, wading in the river, grabbing just enough fish to eat for that day. He consumes everything he produces immediately.
Subsistence level. Short production cycle.
Exactly. High effort, low yield, immediate consumption. His life, and likely his descendants, stays pretty much the same.
Now Linda. She has a low time preference. She sees the bigger picture, the value of the detour.
She operates differently. Maybe she fishes with her hands for only 6 hours, enough to get by for the day.
Okay.
And she dedicates those remaining 2 hours, her saved time, to starting work on that fishing rod. She accepts a little less rest or leisure today for a better tomorrow. That's her first investment.
Okay, so she puts in the work, maybe over a week. She finishes the rod. Now what? This is where things diverge, right?
Massively. Her investment pays off immediately. With the rod, let's say she can now catch twice as many fish as Harry in the same 8 hours.
So she could just feast or work less.
She could. But remember, she has low time preference. She's still thinking long term. She realizes, hey, I only need to fish for 4 hours now to meet my daily needs.
Which frees up the other 4 hours.
Exactly. And what does she do with that time? Does she just relax?
If she has low TP, probably not.
Right? She reinvests it. She starts gathering materials to build a small boat. A canoe, maybe?
Compounding the investment.
Precisely. A month later, Linda has a rod and a boat. Now she can go out into deeper water, catch bigger, more valuable fish Harry can't even reach.
And her fishing time probably drops even more.
Maybe now it only takes her 1 hour a day to get the food she needs the rest of her time. More capital accumulation, building better nets, maybe figuring out how to preserve fish, teaching her kids these skills.
The long-term trajectory here is just staggering.
It really is Harry's lineage. They're likely stuck in that same high-effort, low-yield subsistence loop. Linda's lineage, driven by that initial low TP, which likely gets passed down culturally.
They just keep accumulating capital, specializing, innovating.
Leading to massively increased productivity, wealth, quality of life. You fast forward to today, and Linda's descendants, metaphor.
We own the fishing fleets.
Exactly. They're the ones designing, funding, and operating things like that huge deep-sea trawler mentioned in the sources, the Annalise Elena. A vessel like that represents decades, maybe centuries, of prior capital accumulation and low time preference thinking,
Years of design, building, financing.
all requiring inventors with a very long time horizon, willing to fund something that might not pay off for years, but will hopefully operate for decades. For Linda's line, catching fish became this incredibly complex, capital-intensive, multi-decade process. For Harry's, it's still just a few hours each day. The TP difference created entirely different worlds. Hashtag Booney. The Stanford Marshmallow Experiment.
That fishing story really shows the huge, multi-generational economic stakes. But what about individual choices day to day? There's a famous psychology experiment that seems to capture this exact mechanism at the personal level, right? The marshmallow test.
Ah, yes, the Stanford Marshmallow Experiment. Walter Mischel, late 60s. It's become iconic for a reason.
Remind us how it worked. It was pretty simple.
Super simple, elegant design. Kids, usually around 4 or 5 years old, were brought into a room, one by one. They were presented with a treat. They liked a marshmallow, maybe a cookie or pretzel.
Okay.
The researcher told the child, I have to step out for a few minutes. You can eat this treat right now if you want. But if you can wait until I come back without eating it, you'll get a second one as a reward.
So a direct test of delaying gratification. One treat now or 2 treats later.
Exactly. Pure time preference in action. The kids who managed to wait the 15 minutes or so.
They were the low time preference kids in that context.
Right. But the really powerful insight, the part that links directly back to economics and life outcomes, came years, even decades later.
Mischel and his team followed up with these kids as they grew up.
They did.
Yeah.
And the correlations they found were just striking.
What did they find?
Low time preference, measured simply by whether a preschooler could wait for that second marshmallow, was a strong predictor of success later in life.
Yeah, in what ways?
Things like better academic performance, significantly higher SAT scores,
Wow.
lower body mass index, so better physical health management, and notably, much lower rates of problems with drug addiction or substance abuse.
So that childhood ability to delay gratification seemed to translate directly into a better ability to invest in their future selves as adults.
That's exactly the interpretation.
Yeah.
It's like a muscle. The ability to manage impulses, to prioritize long-term goals over immediate pleasure.
This brings us back to something you touched on earlier. We often think of economics as trades between different people.
Right, buying and selling.
But maybe the most important economic decisions we make are the trades we make with our future selves.
I think that's a really profound point from the sources. Think about it.
Mm.
Every single day, you're constantly making deals with future you.
How so?
Well, deciding to put money into savings instead of blowing it on something impulsive right now, that's a trade. Less fun today for more security tomorrow. Choosing to spend time learning a difficult new skill for a future career instead of taking an easy job now. Investing time studying for an exam instead of going to a party, knowing it reduces future stress and improves future options.
Every one of those is a present cost for a future benefit.
Exactly. And the decision in every single case hinges, fundamentally, on your time preference.
Yeah.
How much do you value that future benefit compared to the present sacrifice?
And the sources seem to suggest this internal TP is almost more important than external circumstances.
That's a hard truth they present. Low TP individuals, the argument goes, tend to find ways to improve their situation, to save, to build capital, almost regardless of where they start. High TP individuals, conversely, often seem to self-sabotage.
Even if they start with advantages.
Absolutely. Think of the stereotype, which sadly often holds true, of the incredibly talented athlete or artist who earns millions but ends up broke.
High income, but even higher time preference. Immediate consumption wins out.
Exactly. They consume their capital, both financial and sometimes personal, very quickly. On the flip side, you see people with maybe average talent but strong discipline, low TP. They work steadily, save consistently, invest wisely.
And they often end up building lasting financial security, maybe passing wealth to their kids.
It's that ability to prioritize the long game, to appreciate the power of decades-long investment and delayed gratification. Only possible, the argument goes, with a low time preference.
Okay, we've clearly established the link. High time preference leads to problems, personally and societally. Low TP leads to investment and flourishing. But let's loop back to the money itself. How does the type of money drive that preference? You said the ideal is fixed supply, which isn't really possible.
Right, perfection is elusive.
So why did gold emerge historically as the most successful form of sound money? What made it work so well?
Gold has this key property. An extremely high stock-to-flow ratio.
Stock to flow. Explain that.
The stock is all the gold that's ever been mined, and is still around thousands of years' worth. It's huge because gold doesn't really decay or corrode. The flow is the new supply added each year from mining.
And for gold, that flow is small compared to the stock.
Tiny. Even if the price of gold goes up, incentivizing more mining, it's incredibly difficult and expensive to increase the annual production significantly. The new supply is always just a trickle compared to the vast existing stockpile.
So the total supply is very stable, very predictable year to year.
Exactly. That resistance to easy increases in supply, that high stock-to-flow ratio, is the key characteristic that made it emerge as sound money.
Now, the sources tackle that famous criticism from Keynes, right? That mining gold is basically pointless, just digging metal out of one hole to bury it in another vault. It doesn't add real wealth.
Yes, Keynes definitely saw it as wasteful. But the counter-argument flips that idea on its head.
How so?
Gold actually works precisely because it's relatively unattractive to produce just for monetary purposes. Its difficulty and expense mean that very few resources are wasted solely on creating the money itself.
Compared to if we use something easier to get.
Right. It forces people to channel their energy and resources into producing other valuable goods and services to trade for the gold, rather than just producing more money.
What if we tried using, say, copper as money? It's much more abundant.
Okay, imagine that scenario.
Mm.
Society's time preference drops, people want to save, so they start accumulating copper. The demand makes the price of copper shoot up.
Okay.
Because copper is relatively easy to find and mine compared to gold, that high price would trigger a massive copper production boom. Huge amounts of new copper would flood the market.
And the value of everyone's copper savings would plummet.
Exactly. The supply explodes, devaluing all the existing holdings. The savers get punished, effectively robbed, while the copper producers get temporarily rich for just digging up more of the monetary medium.
So gold's difficulty prevents that cycle.
It prevents that kind of runaway inflation and theft by supply increase, inherent in easier-to-produce commodities. Gold forces production efforts elsewhere. Hashtag B. Gold's incredible stability, historical evidence. Okay, so gold's properties made it sound. Let's talk stability. Measuring purchasing power over centuries is tricky, obviously. Goods change. It's not perfect, no. But the long-term trends, especially when you look at basic commodities, are pretty remarkable. Let's take the Roman Empire example from the sources.
Right, Diocletian's price edict from 301 AD.
Yeah, if you take the prices listed in that edict for basic agricultural goods and you measure them in grams of gold,
How do they compare to today?
it's astonishingly similar. The example given is about a pound of meat. In 301 AD, its price in gold converts to roughly $4.50 in today's money.
Wait, seriously? After 1,700 years?
Basically unchanged purchasing power for essential goods when measured in gold. Think about that psychological impact. A unit of account so stable you could, theoretically, time travel 17 centuries and still buy roughly the same amount of necessities with the same weight of gold.
That kind of stability must breed incredible long-term trust.
It enables genuine intergenerational planning and saving. Now, look at more recent history. That study by Roy Jastrom on English prices from 1560 to 1976.
What did that find?
It confirms the pattern. During the main period of the classical gold standard, roughly 1700 to 1914, gold's purchasing power in England was remarkably stable.
And after 1914, when countries started messing with or leaving the gold standard, especially after World War I.
Instability shot up. Volatility increased significantly.
But the real complete break didn't happen until 1971, right? When the U.S. officially closed the gold window.
That was the final nail in the coffin for the Bretton Woods system, yeah.
Yeah.
Major global currencies were fully detached from gold.
And what happened to the value of those government paper currencies, the fiat currencies, since then?
Total collapse relative to gold. Since 71, even the strongest fiat currencies, the dollar, the euro, the yen, they've lost something like 97 to 98% of their value compared to gold.
So gold held its value over 17 centuries, but fiat currencies lost almost everything in just 50 years.
That's the comparison the data shows. And you see it in commodity prices, too. The sources showed charts, like the price of a barrel of oil.
Measured in gold versus dollars.
Yeah, measured in gold, the oil price since 1971 has been relatively stable, fluctuating but basically range-bound. Measured in dollars, it's been incredibly volatile and gone up astronomically. The measuring stick itself keeps shrinking.
So if fiat money is supposedly superior, more flexible, all that, why do central banks around the world still hold massive reserves of gold? Many are even buying more.
It's the ultimate irony, isn't it? The issuers of fiat currency don't fully trust their own product over the long term.
They're hedging their bets.
They're behaving like low-time preference savers themselves. They hold gold, a non-state, difficult-to-manipulate asset, as the ultimate insurance policy against the very monetary system they manage. Their actions speak louder than their words about the enduring monetary nature of gold.
Okay, so we have the shift away from sound money towards constantly depreciating fiat money. And central banks often target positive inflation, right? Like 2% a year.
Yes, that's explicit policy in many places now. A slow, steady erosion of purchasing power is considered desirable, for various reasons we won't get into now.
But what does that constant depreciation do to the incentive to save? It seems like it creates a kind of moral hazard.
It absolutely does. If you know your money is guaranteed to lose value every year, why hold on to it? Why delay gratification?
It pushes you to spend it now before it loses more value.
Or it forces you to seek out investments that promise returns higher than the rate of inflation just to break even in real terms. This pushes people away from safe, simple saving into potentially higher risk assets they might not fully understand.
You're forced onto a treadmill of chasing yield just to stand still.
Exactly. It penalizes prudence and encourages immediate spending or risk-taking.
And the data on savings rates reflects this shift, doesn't it?
Starkly. The sources looked at national savings rates in the G7 countries, the big developed economies.
What was the trend?
In 1970, roughly the end of the gold exchange standard era, the average savings rate across the G7 was about 12.66% of GDP. Pretty healthy.
And by 2015, after decades of fiat money,
It had plummeted to just 3.39%.
yow, that's a collapse, a nearly three-quarters reduction.
Yeah. It's like the entire developed world shifted from being somewhat like Linda, investing a decent chunk, towards being much more like Harry, consuming almost everything produced right away.
Except for Switzerland, right. The sources noted they held on to gold ties longer.
Yes, Switzerland maintained elements of a gold standard longer than others, and correspondingly, their savings rates stayed in double digits for much longer. The correlation seems strong.
And if people aren't saving, they can't accumulate capital for investment, which means growth has to be fueled by something else.
Debt. If you're not funding investment and consumption out of savings, you fund it by borrowing from the future.
And we've certainly seen debt explode.
Globally, personal debt, household debt, often exceeding 100% of annual income in Western countries. Corporate debt. And of course, government debt, which has reached astronomical levels, multiple times GDP in many cases.
How is that level of debt even possible?
It's facilitated by the central bank's ability to manage interest rates, often keeping them artificially low by, well, creating more money. This encourages borrowing and discourages saving, maximizing consumption now.
Which brings us back to that Keynesian idea, the common refrain. National debt doesn't matter, we owe it to ourselves. Our sources really attack this. Why?
They call it a dangerous fallacy, rooted in high time preference thinking.
How so? If it's internal debt.
Because ourselves isn't one unified blob. It's different people and crucially different generations. When the current government spends money it doesn't have, created via inflation or borrowed, it allows the current generation, particularly those favored by government spending, to consume more now.
And who pays later?
Future generations. They inherit the debt burden, which has to be paid either through higher future taxes, reduced future government services, or, most likely, continued inflation, which is itself a hidden tax.
So it's a massive transfer of wealth and consumption from the future to the present.
Exactly. Theft from future you, writ large on a national scale, enabled by unsound money.
So when we see this culture of, flashy consumption, expensive cars, huge houses, all financed by debt that's often portrayed as capitalism, but it's not.
According to this perspective, it's the opposite of capitalism. Capitalism, in the Austrian view, is about capital accumulation, which requires saving, investment, delayed gratification, low time preference.
And debt-fueled consumption is.
That's the consumption of capital, or the consumption of future production brought forward. It's the hallmark of a high time preference society operating on unsound money, where saving is penalized and immediate gratification is subsidized. Hashtag B, political and social erosion.
You mentioned earlier how unsound money gives politicians immense power, and politicians, almost by definition, operate on short time horizons, right? Election cycles.
Exactly. Their primary focus is usually the next election, which is only a few years away. They have a very high effective time preference built into their job.
So when they control money spigots.
The temptation to use that power for short-term game funding projects to please current voters, handing out benefits just before an election, becomes almost irresistible.
Even if the long-term cost is inflation or debt piled onto the future?
Right. Why make hard choices today, like cutting spending or raising taxes, when you can just create money and push the consequences down the road? H.L. Mencken had that great quote.
What was it?
Every election is a sort of advanced option sale of stolen goods. In this context, the goods are stolen primarily from future generations via currency debasement.
Okay, so the economic and political consequences are clear. But the sources go further, suggesting this erosion reaches into the most fundamental social unit, the family. How does unsound money impact the family?
The argument is quite profound. Historically, one of the primary economic functions of a strong family unit was providing long-term security.
Taking care of parents in old age, passing down wealth and skills.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This created a powerful economic incentive to invest heavily in building stable, multi-generational family structures. Children were, in a sense, your retirement plan.
Okay.
But what happens in a world of unsound money? First, saving long-term becomes difficult or pointless, as we discussed. The wealth you try to accumulate for your kids or your old age keeps evaporating.
Right.
And second, simultaneously, the state steps in and promises to provide cradle-to-grave security, unemployment benefits, healthcare, pensions, Social Security funded, often by that same magic of money creation and debt.
So the state essentially offers to replace the family's economic security function.
It tries to. This drastically reduces the perceived economic necessity of investing huge amounts of personal effort into building those strong family bonds for future support. Why sacrifice so much for family if the state promises to take care of you anyway, and your savings will likely be worthless?
It weakens the economic glue holding families together over the long term.
That's the argument. And while the state can replace the economic function to some degree, it can't replace the emotional and psychological benefits.
Which studies show are crucial for well-being.
Absolutely. Life satisfaction, happiness, they correlate very strongly with deep, long-term intimate relationships, strong family ties. And conversely, the breakdown of the family unit is strongly correlated with rising rates of depression, anxiety, and psychological distress, particularly, the sources note, among women.
So there's a deeper philosophical link being drawn here.
Yes, the sources suggest the whole mindset behind fiat currency and Keynesian economics, focusing on aggregate demand now. Managing short-term cycles aligns with a higher time preference, maybe even a more hedonistic short-term view of life itself.
Contrasting sharply with
a kind of long-term perspective, ethical discipline, and focus on legacy that characterizes low-time preference societies, where strong, stable families are seen as the absolute bedrock of civilization and intergenerational wealth transfer.
Let's shift focus now to the cultural sphere. This is often where you can really see the underlying values, the soul of a society. And the argument is that high time preference, fueled by unsound money, damages this too, starting with innovation.
Yeah, the impact on technological progress. The argument goes back to that golden age of invention, roughly the late 19th century, under the classical gold standard.
What was special about that period?
Because money was sound and savings were high, there were vast pools of accumulated capital available. And crucially, investors had the confidence to fund really long-term, ambitious, high-risk projects.
They had a low enough time preference to wait potentially decades for a payoff.
Exactly, which is often necessary for fundamental breakthroughs.
And there's data suggesting that era was uniquely innovative.
Yes. The sources cite physicist Jonathan Huebner's research. He found that while the sheer number of patents and minor innovations kept increasing through the 20th century, the rate of truly major world-changing innovations, when measured per capita, actually peaked back in the 19th century.
Huh. That supports Peter Thiel's framework, doesn't it? The 0-to-1 versus 1-to-many idea.
It aligns very well. Thiel argues that the sound money era, before roughly 1914, was the age of 0-to-1.
Meaning?
Creating entirely new things that simply didn't exist before. Going from nothing to a working prototype, a fundamental new technology. That's the hard part, the really foundational step.
Like harnessing electricity, the internal combustion engine.
Things like that. Then Thiel argues, much of the 20th century, especially after the breakdown of sound money, became more about one-to-many.
Which is?
Taking those foundational 19th century inventions and refining them, improving them, mass-producing them, marketing them. Globalization, essentially. Important, yes, but less about fundamental creation.
Can we list some of those specific 0-to-1 breakthroughs from the 19th century that basically created our modern world?
It's actually kind of mind-blowing when you list them.
Yeah.
We're talking about things like reliable hot and cold running water in homes, a massive public health revolution,
Okay.
the internal combustion engine, obviously, electricity generation and distribution, mass production techniques, modern medicine, anesthesia, antiseptics, X-rays, understanding germ theory,
Communication breakthroughs.
the telegraph, which was the internet of its day, shrinking the globe instantly. Even the conceptual basis for the computer with Babbage's analytical engine in the 1830s, skyscrapers, radio waves.
These all required huge upfront investment and incredibly long time horizons with uncertain payoffs.
Absolutely, the kind of deep patient capital that low time preference and sound money fosters.
And the argument is that the fiat system, with its inherent short-termism and inflation,
Discourages those decades-long 0 to 1 moonshots. Why commit massive resources for 20 years if you know inflation will erode the value of your capital and any eventual payoff? The incentive structure shifts
towards what?
towards quicker wins, incremental improvements, faster product cycles, maybe more focus on marketing and finance rather than fundamental R&D. What some call moving fast and breaking things, which rarely leads to foundational discovery. Hashtag TED, hashtag B, EAT, Pantover.
The poverty of modern art.
Okay, that's innovation. Now, perhaps the most provocative claim, the connection to the arts. If you want a cultural mirror reflecting time preference, the sources say, look at art. What does low TP art look like?
Think monumental. Think durable. Think requiring incredible skill and dedication over long periods. Low TP art aims for timeless beauty, something that transcends fleeting trends.
Like the Renaissance or the great classical composers?
Exactly. Patrons back then, like the Medici family, operated with sound money and a very long view. They were investing in their legacy, funding projects that took years, even decades.
The Sistine Chapel ceiling. Bach's Brandenburg concertos. Masterpieces that required immense patience and resources from the patrons, and unbelievable dedication and craft from the artists.
You mentioned Michelangelo and the Sistine Chapel. The physical effort alone was insane.
It really was. 4 years lying on his back on scaffolding, paint dripping in his eyes, body contorted. He even wrote a poem about the agony.
Describing his neck cricked, his spine twisted.
My brush, above me all the time, dribbles paint onto my face. That's the ultimate low time preference artistic endeavor. Sacrificing present comfort, health, everything for the sake of creating something perfect, something eternal.
Yeah.
Not for quick fame, not for political points.
Okay, so that's the low TP benchmark. Now contrast that with the argument about modern art, the art of the high TP fiat money era.
The characteristics highlighted are almost the polar opposite. Often cheap materials, quickly produced work, a focus on shock value, novelty, or transgression over beauty or skill.
Arrogance, maybe.
Yeah, sometimes an explicit rejection of traditional craft. And often a heavy reliance on tying the art to transient political ideologies or simplistic social commentary instead of aiming for universal aesthetic appeal.
It's art reflecting immediacy, disposability.
That's the argument. When the money itself isn't durable, when the future is heavily discounted, why would artists invest decades honing a craft to create something lasting? The incentive shifts towards making a quick splash, getting attention now.
And the patronage system changed too, right? Not just wealthy families with long views.
Dramatically. Those sound money patrons, often with inherited taste and a focus on legacy, were gradually replaced by, well, often by government funding agencies, museum bureaucracies,
Different priorities.
often driven by short-term political agendas or bureaucratic ideas of what's important or challenging, rather than necessarily what's beautiful or skillful. Taste becomes centralized, planned, often favoring the provocative or the easily explained in art speak.
And the sources mention a really strange historical twist involving Cold War propaganda.
Yeah, this is wild. The argument is that both the U.S. and the Soviet Union actively promoted certain kinds of modern art, specifically abstract expressionism, like Pollock or Rothko, for political reasons.
Why? It seems counterintuitive for propaganda.
The claim is the U.S., via the CIA indirectly, funded and promoted it internationally to showcase American freedom and individualism, messy, chaotic, breaking from European tradition. It was seen as culturally distinct and modern. Essentially, aesthetically empty art chosen by spy agencies as a tool.
Wow. So the value wasn't inherent beauty, but political utility.
And its ability to be produced quickly, to look new, fit the high TP, short-term political goals. It highlights how detached value became from craft or objective aesthetics.
Which leads to that final, almost comical point the sources make.
About the museum guards.
Yeah, accidentally throwing out expensive modern art installations because they literally look like trash or leftover construction material.
It happens surprisingly often. It underscores the potential vacuum of objective value when art becomes purely conceptual, or shocking, or quickly assembled. Value is dictated by critics, curators, and the flow of easy money, not necessarily by measurable skill or enduring appeal. The art of a high TP society, the argument concludes, reflects its monetary foundation. It can be impulsive, disposable, and ultimately sometimes mistaken for garbage. ###tag 8, conclusion and provocation.
Okay, let's try and bring all these threads together. It's a huge scope we've covered. The core argument seems to be sound money fosters a low time preference.
Right, a willingness to delay gratification, to think long term.
And that low time preference is presented as the essential foundation culturally, economically, for almost everything we associate with a flourishing civilization.
A complex investment, building capital over generations, stable families, ethical behavior, maybe even great art and science. It all rests on valuing the future.
Conversely, unsound money, the kind that's easily manipulated and constantly loses value.
It flips the incentives. It encourages high time preference, living for the moment, consuming now, borrowing from the future.
Which leads, according to this view, to debt, short-term political thinking, maybe social fragmentation, and the gradual eating away of the society's accumulated capital, both physical and cultural.
We're essentially witnessing, the argument goes, the predictable decay that follows when the monetary bedrock becomes unstable.
This deep dive went way beyond just economics, really. It's fundamentally about human behavior, incentives, and civilizational trajectories.
It connects the dots in a very broad, challenging way.
So, to leave our listeners with something to chew on, if the stability of your money really does shape your personal time horizon, your willingness to invest in your own future, then how much of your effort, your daily work, the mental energy you spend managing your finances is currently just being wasted? Wasted fighting a defensive battle against inflation, just trying to preserve the value you've already created.
Instead of using that energy for truly productive, forward-looking things, playing defense against currency debasement rather than playing offense, building your future.
Right. What fundamental, maybe decades-long project in your own life, your family, your community, might you be subtly discouraged from even starting simply because the monetary ground beneath your feet feels so unstable?
That's the provocation. What 0 to 1 potential is being suppressed by our collective high time preference, driven by the money we use?
Something to definitely mull over. Thank you for joining us for the deep dive.